Welcome to Beyond the Megawatt. It's Mara and Val, and we have a special guest with us today, Christy Black with Black Hydrovac. So welcome, Christy. Today, our topic is innovation, and it's below the surface. We don't get to talk about this environment much, but we're super excited to have Christy on with us today, and we're going to talk a little bit about, safe excavation, smarter teams. Leadership is just a big part of what Christy has built over the years. And so, Christy, why don't you just introduce yourself, share with our listeners a little bit about your background and where you started and how you got here today.
Sure. So my husband and I, we moved to Northern Virginia in 2018 because he builds data centers. I had a very different role. My career was a very traditional one. I worked in nonprofit and education. And I had a great career. COVID happened. And, everyone is rethinking their life decisions. There's a lot of change for a lot of people. And that really sparked a change in my personal journey where for many years, Adam and I, we were playing around and talking about what if I started a small business? And it was always something that seemed a little far-fetched, ridiculous. I don't know if I could actually be my own boss. I don't know if I can really pull this off. Plus, my background was not in construction. So why would I start a construction company? We started playing around with this idea of hydrovacs several years ago. And it was just hey, Adam would come home, he'd say, hey, there's this new piece of construction equipment on my job sites. And it's interesting. Maybe we should take a look at this. Looks like it's growing. I can't find enough of them for my jobs.
I have a quick question, just to timeline this. So you said, you were kind of thinking about, during the recession, what that was. So when did that conversation, you said a few years before, was that the few years before COVID or a few years before the recession, I mean?
The idea of starting a small business had been kind of a theme in our marriage. It kind of kept coming up and we would play around with different ideas. And, it was probably 2018, 2019 when vac trucks first came on our radar. And we just played with the idea a little bit, not really taking it too serious, but would also throw it out kind of, we're attending networking events together. Adam would just kind of bring me along. I wasn't part of the industry, but I would still, we're just going to dinner parties. And I would throw out, or Adam would throw out for me. He'd say, hey, Christy's going to start a vac truck company. And it's like, well, that's ridiculous. But I don't know, like 6 months later, I had a couple people call me and say, hey, did you ever start that business? If you did, I have work for you. It's like, okay, like maybe I should take this a little more seriously.
Yeah, the universe is calling you.
Exactly.
This might be a good time for our listeners that have no idea what hydro excavation is. Can you tell us what that is and why Adam was so excited about seeing more of that on his job sites?
So hydro excavation is a method of digging that uses high pressure water and vacuum suction. So you can literally think pressure washer and a shop vac, but industrial sized. So,
and then compare that to the legacy traditional way of doing it.
Right. And traditionally you would be digging with either shovels or with heavy equipment like excavators, loaders, big earth moving equipment.
And why wouldn't we, he comes home and is like, oh, this is this new equipment on my site, but it's not new. It's actually been commonly used in other regions, I think, like Canada, right?
So it's still pretty new technology. So it looks like maybe about 30 years or so that it's been kind of part of the construction world. It started in pipe cleaning. So some people are more familiar with cleaning pipes, and that's it's a little bit of a different setup for the trucks. As people were doing the pipe cleaning work with high pressure water and vacuum, they also figured out that they were accidentally digging, creating big holes. But they figured out that it was a really safe way to dig, that you could dig and nothing was going to be damaged. That's where that safety aspect is where it really started to take off in the general construction world, because hydro excavation is the safest, non-destructive way of digging that exists. And we can dig directly on top of underground infrastructure. So all of the utility lines, even like other things that are sensitive in the ground, we can dig on top of that, and we're not going to hurt anything.
Not just for excavation though, but also for potholing as well, right?
Right. So the two different things that we're typically doing is slot trenching, which is we're in a highly congested area where there's a lot of stuff in the ground, and we're going to dig a new trench for new utilities to be installed. Or potholing is where we dig small holes and we just kind of run along the existing utility lines, and it just exposes them. Sometimes it's 25 feet every 50 feet. You expose the utility so that a piece of heavy equipment can come in after, and they're able to see exactly where the utility lines are. Now, this is a step above 811. So for public utilities, you call 811 before you dig. That's the rules. They're going to come and they're going to estimate. They're going to paint lines on the ground based off of electromagnetic signals that they're inducing into the utility lines, and they're going to estimate where those are. And they give themselves like a 2-foot variance. It's pretty good. It's not perfect. And sometimes if there's a lot of congestion in the ground, there's a lot of interference in the signals, and that continues to degrade the quality of those marks. So for construction companies, for owners that are really sensitive to making sure that their utility service doesn't get disrupted, hydrovac plays a really important role in maintaining their utility service.
And I can see how this could be, from a safety perspective, it is one of the number one items that I have seen personally when I've been in the field is those utility strikes. It's a best guess, right? You have, as-builts and so forth. They come out, like you said, and they put the lines on the ground. But sometimes, just sometimes, it's not an exact science and you hit utilities anyway. And we definitely don't want to do that. And especially when you're building a data center campus. And this isn't the first data center that was built, right? This is the 5th or 6th building that's getting built. And there's already been some infrastructure put into place. And you definitely don't want to knock out the other data centers in the process. So yes, I can see how this is really exciting to your husband when he started talking about hydro excavation. And so talk about how that even works in like wintertime.
Oh, sure.
Or like frozen ground.
That's a fun, extra that the hydrovac trucks are able to do. We can keep digging all year long. So we really try to encourage some of this, because when the ground gets frozen, traditional excavation equipment is going to struggle with breaking through frozen ground. We have hot water heaters, so we can heat up our giant tanks of water, and we're able to melt the ground. We continue digging even when the ground is frozen.
So I start to think about how winterization and part of the winterization planning that folks go into, and how are we going to be able to keep moving forward and stay on schedule. A lot of times those are the things that slow the schedule down. Is the winter and the frozen grounds. And so I love this solution. I love this solution. And it's the safest thing from a people, like you don't have as many people involved because it is the machine rather than a person with a shovel, for instance, who's sitting there, who's going to come directly in contact with a utility possibly.
Right. And as I was learning about hydro excavation from the beginning, safety was a huge factor because you could tell that this industry was going to naturally expand because it was so safe. And it was safe for the operators because if you're excavating with heavy equipment or with a shovel and you strike a utility, there's danger to the person that is, sitting in the bucket. If you hit an electric line on an excavator, there's danger to that operator. Or if you're using a shovel and you hit an electric line, there's danger that can happen to you.
And then, in addition to the utility strikes, one thing that we're seeing in these new areas that we're building data centers is the environmental impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
And soil preservation and
Mm-hmm.
these special environments where I would imagine that this is a more friendly approach to.
It is. So in Virginia, we've got the Chesapeake watershed, which is something that, all job sites have to manage. And hydro excavation is a more environmentally friendly way to dig because we can dig so precisely. So we're only disturbing the exact amount of soil that needs to be moved, and it reduces runoff. So we can cut, 6-inch lines in the ground, and they can be 6 feet deep. So we're very, very precise. We're only moving the exact amount of dirt that we have to move.
Yeah, and that can be compelling when you're going into these new areas. And, we try to bring as much, with sustainability and protecting the environment around these data centers. So I think that could be compelling impact into some of these new regions. That's great. So maybe we talk through a little bit about, obviously you built a company in a very short amount of time, right? This is how many years now?
Since this summer will be 5 years.
5 years. And the market is changing so fast, right? We've just seen technology changing, the requirements are changing, and here you are building a company, you're new into construction. Can you share a little bit about your culture there and how you've built these high performance teams, and a little bit about your culture and what you feel is really important there?
Sure. So, I started Black Hydrovac not because I suddenly discovered an unknown desire to dig holes. It was never really about that. I chose the market because it was something that was very technology forward. It was working in the trades, which was something that I was really excited about. It was serving high-tech clients, which I really wanted to be inside that space. But what I really wanted to do was build teams of people. Hydrovac just happened to be a really good space to work in. I liked the technology. I couldn't go in and be an electrician. Like, I couldn't start an electric company. I don't know anything about that. And everybody else knows so much more. But Hydrovac was an emerging technology, and it was something that a lot of people had never heard of before. I could learn this. So it was a small enough niche. I could learn it, and then I could have something to offer into the industry. The whole thing about building the company was always about bringing together a great team of people. And, especially working in the trades, there's a lot of people that end up in trades that they didn't really mean to be there, or they get put in situations of, they're just kind of told what to do. This is your job. Do this job. Don't color outside of the lines. Stick to what we hired you to do. And I just, and my previous background also really helped me consider how to do that differently. Like, I really wanted to create a company culture that would bring people in and, hey, let's figure out what you're good at. This is the base task. We do hydro excavation. We've got to learn how to be really good at hydro excavation. But what else? Like, We wanted people that would be great at problem solving and critical thinking. I wanted to give people freedom to, learn what they're doing, to make mistakes, and figure out how to grow, how to get better at their craft, better at just when you have a leader that will believe in you and give you opportunity, like people can really thrive, and that's what I wanted to do.
I love that. And it seems like you've been in a position to educate, right? Around even with the other trades and the utilities. I'm assuming you come across a lot of folks on these projects that have never even been a part of something like this. So there's an education, factor. Do you enjoy that part of the? I would imagine you do. Just knowing your personality, just sharing, right? A new way of doing things and innovative technology is in different aspects. Valerie and I have, we have other episodes we've recorded, and that's kind of like a highlight of something we're tackling is how do you get through this new innovation and the deployment and the implementation and the education and the training. So not only are you doing that within your company, but you're also doing that with your partners and your customers and other folks in the trade as well.
That's absolutely true. So one thing that happens to us pretty regularly, our truck will be out digging, and we will kind of collect an audience of like other construction workers or, people walking the site. They've never seen a hydrovac work. So they come and they watch just because they've never seen it before. So that's a really fun aspect of it, where we're just able to kind of teach people about our equipment and what we're doing and why it's important. It was a really good factor for me coming into the business because it was something that I could talk about, that I could share. I was like, this is what this is. This is new. This is emerging in the market. This is why you should start incorporating it more in your jobs. So that was a really good fit for me. But on the other side of it, in the trades, it's not a well-known trade. So we're also having to recruit very hard. So we market pretty heavily to attract people that would to become interested in being hydrovac operators.
Where are you finding these people? Like, where do you go?
The typical way is Indeed. We hire through Indeed. Also word of mouth, referrals from our own employees, referrals from anybody that we know. But we have to train. And we really do take people that, we take assistant operators that are entry level. So you don't have to have any construction experience. We'll teach it all to you. As an operator, you have to have a CDL license. We prefer hiring people that have had heavy equipment operator experience. But other than that, we really have to train because it's such a new trade. There's not really training that exists in the market. I can't buy it.
Yeah,
I can't send somebody to school for it. We have to do it ourselves.
Well, what a great opportunity for someone who's like, listen, college isn't for me. and I'm really looking I definitely like to be hands-on. I want to be a part of something that I can go in and learn, they'll train me, and I can really grow a career in this. What type of person, when you're like, hey, if you are these three things, you're probably going to fit well in the hydro excavation world. What kind of person? What do they look like?
Well, I'm always looking for people that are going to be like really problem solvers, because you're going to be put in a lot of different situations. You've never been in them before. How are you going to be able to work through that? You need to be able to work outside. So, we work in all weather. We work in the dirt. It does get dirty. But the quality that I think I love more than anything when we bring people in, there are some people that are naturally gifted equipment workers, like equipment operators. It's not a quality that I can understand at all, but there are people, their brains work where a machine becomes an extension of their body. And they are able to do things with machines that are really, really incredible. They just understand, like spatially, where, when they push this button, this arm is going to move and this is where it's going to end up. And they do it as naturally as they, move their hands. And when we find people like that, that is like, it's just such a special and unique quality. We love seeing people, giving people
Like
those
people with
opportunities.
the mindset that are really spatial aware. Like you can kind of look at an object and know that you're packing the back of your car exactly how every piece is going to go in there, where other people wouldn't be able to fit it all in. You've been able to figure out how to pack your car really, really well. So if you just have that spatial awareness, just that geometry type of mind,
Mm-hmm.
and you like electronics, even you probably are
Mm-hmm.
really good, with electronics, then these two worlds kind of come together, and
Mm-hmm.
you probably do really well at being a hydrovac excavator.
You can.
I love this. I love this. So tell us about a little bit more about the team you've brought together and how you've built that over the years. I mean, like you said, you've been at this for 5 years now. It's probably starting to feel like a well-oiled machine at this point.
I hope so. Well, some days yes, sometimes no. It's getting a lot better, and I've always built the company with employees, so it is my business. Adam is in the data center industry. He has his own job. This company has been mine. Um, so it's a little bit different than like a husband and wife construction company team. I've always been dependent on who I can hire because I'm not driving the trucks, and I'm not out doing the digging. Now, I am certainly out there many days side by side with my guys, especially in the early days where we were figuring out like keeping the equipment running, learning how to use it. We do a lot of reporting, so I was developing how we're going to create our reports and doing measurements and site walks and all of that. Um, but I've always tried to, something that I've learned about myself as an entrepreneur is once I can create a process and once something is repeatable, I need to give it away because otherwise I'm going to reinvent it over and over and over again. And that's not efficient and that's not helpful to the company. Once we have a process, somebody else can take that over and they're going to do it way better than I can. So because we've always had that rhythm, we've been able to build a strong base of our leadership team.
That's really something that I have seen over and over and over, not only within companies I've worked in, but either clients that I'm supporting. What I'm really seeing is this: if you that thing that you said about consistency and repeatability, and in a time where, we have labor constraints and we have the quality of labor, the folks who are managing have about half the amount of years of experience as they did a decade before. And we have this mass retirement, all of this knowledge going out the door. And we're losing that knowledge because we didn't do anything or implement anything that created some continuous improvement, no repeatability, no sharing of knowledge. And so thinking about automation and how we can ensure that we're capturing lessons learned and not repeating the same mistakes. And what I've seen in a lot in the field is if you went from the office to office, project to project, they were all different. There was no consistency. And so what you're saying is you're building it. Well, frankly, from my perspective, you're building something in the right way. And you've even learned from industry mistakes. And you're like, oh yeah, we're going to build this a little differently. And I think it's really beautiful. That's important. So can you kind of go in a little bit more about how you create the continuous improvement and learning and sharing of that knowledge? Do you have something that you've built inside that process that helps folks share when someone new comes on board?
I mean, it's standard stuff. I mean, it's having SOPs. It's making sure that you're following processes over and over again. That you're not like I said, if I was doing the work, I would constantly be reinventing the wheel. You know, how should we do invoices? Let's try it this way. How should we be sending these emails? Maybe we should be tweaking it this way. So I'm the wrong person to be doing that. But um, once we have, once processes are set, um, documenting those things and then doing the best we can to repeat them over and over again. I mean, it's not it's nothing new. It's but it is having discipline because it's easy to just continually like second guess and like, oh well, this situation is a little bit different. Maybe we should change it up. This is not going to work this time. Like, you gotta give your processes time to work, and you can tweak things, but like your processes will mature over time, but you have to stick with them, and that I really think is more about discipline.
Yeah, and I like how you've said, you're definitely a part of establishing what those processes look like from a strategic level, but hiring smart people and giving them an opportunity to take, okay, we've defined the process, now take your superpower and make this a little better in all those different ways. And I think as a business owner, sometimes that hardest thing is just to let go of that control, because this is your baby, this is your company, and you obviously have to hire and build teams that you trust, that you can say, all right, now I'm going to give this to you, and I trust you to go do something better with it, right? So I love that.
I love what she was saying about SOPs. You would be surprised when small businesses start and they're just getting started and you have all of this tribal knowledge, right? Everybody kind of knows what they're supposed to do. Folks forget about that process piece. They forget to document the SOP. They forget to create that process that when they grow and new people come in, they can get consistent and repeat that process. So I think that was like a really important part of what you said. When you're starting a business and you're launching it and you're growing, you have a best in class process. Will you evolve? Absolutely. As you grow, but at least you're documenting something for today. And if it needs to change in the future, then that's a conversation, but we update that as we go as a team, right? Not in a silo or anything. And you're giving the folks who are on the ground, who are doing it every day, the power to kind of decide, okay, this is currently our process. This is the repeatability that we're going to train the next folks who are coming in on. And this is what best in class and good looks like today. And we're also going to give you the power to say, hey, this is going to evolve. We're becoming a bigger company. We've learned some things. Let's implement those tweaks as we go, but we have a foundational benchmark in place.
And I've certainly had to learn how to get out of the way. And because it's very easy to want to dive back in and like, oh, I'm going to jump in and help solve problems with you. And I just I had to learn like that's not that helpful. Like it feels good in the moment to be able to jump in and like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a problem solver and I'm going to be able to help fix these, fix anything that comes up. But it's better for the team to work through that on their own, where they figure out, what is the problem? What's the solution? How do I do this better next time?
I like that, because if they're figuring it out, they're owning it. Once
Hmm.
they go through that process, they start to own that. I do want to circle back to safety, because everything that you're saying sets the baseline for a safe environment. But there's also this thing that comes into, just recently, some of the accidents that I've heard on job sites, it comes down to the guys that have been doing it the longest. They get into these routines, and I think SOPs and all of this standardization does put us on the right path, right? But it also, how do you keep safety ahead and at the front of these projects every day? Can you kind of share with us around that a little bit?
Sure, it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about safety culture. When we have people that are more experienced, I keep trying to push them into more leadership roles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one way of like keeping our people safe. Like if you have a lot of experience, you're not just taking care of yourself, you're taking care of everybody else that's around you too. Um, so for my crews, we typically work in teams of two, and we have a lead operator, and that lead operator, he's the one that's driving the truck. He's primarily responsible for the movement of all the equipment. Um, he's not just responsible for taking care of himself. He's got to take care of the assistant that's working with him. He's got to take care of anybody that might come into their space, because he doesn't know, like, sometimes we're working, on the side of a road, on a sidewalk. Like, if you have somebody, walking their dog, you've got to take care of them too.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that what you're talking about is that continuous improvement. A couple of decades ago, we had the culture and the environment that's put us where we are today, where we held all of this information close to our chest. We were the only ones who knew the knowledge. We didn't want to share it. We didn't want to train it. We didn't want to hand it down. But you're creating partnerships within your culture that allows them to say, hey, this is part of your job, is to now become a leader, now that you're an expert, an SME, and hand that knowledge on. Talk about the safety things, the things that you learn. And as long as you're teaching it, it's always on the forefront of your mind, and you can't get complacent anymore, to Mara's point. And so I think that just kind of talking about it and just not going through the motions, that's why they say accidents happen within a block of your home. You're more likely to be in an accident because you're just so comfortable. And this gets folks uncomfortable because they know they're working with folks with less experience. They're keeping that on the forefront of their mind. And I just think that's really beautiful. And I think it's a great segue into our audacious question. What do you think, Mara?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is a great time. We like to do this as we start to wrap up. We want to take time to kind of get the listeners in on some things that we don't typically talk about out loud. So Val, do you want to step
Sure,
into this?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about leadership, right? And so I wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit more, as you're a small business and you're growing and everybody's roles are evolving and changing. How do you handle that leadership decision as the company grows and people sort of maybe outgrow their position or their spot in the company?
Sure. So developing a leadership team inside of a fast growing company, I did not know how to run a hydrovac company. I didn't know how to run any company. And we were also doing things very different than what a more traditional hydrovac company would run things. So I'm learning a lot of lessons, and I'm also making a lot of mistakes along the way. I will say that my biggest passion, like my most important thing about why I want to be in this business, is building great teams. Sometimes I've made mistakes, and it's really tough to accept that, to understand that as a leader. It's like, well, I can't let my own ego get in the way of that.
Do you find it hard as a leader? Like, how do you handle situations where you're wrong and you've made a mistake as a leader?
Of course. So I definitely, you have to be really self-reflective. It's something that I work really hard on. I really try to understand what my limitations are, mm-hmm. and where I'm holding the team back. I have to give away responsibility and trust my leaders that they're able to take on that responsibility and run with it.
I think, obviously, what I really, really like about your culture there is the fact, which you just said about, your own limitations. And I think as a leader, that's probably in my career and the managers that I worked for, when they know their limitations and they're able to say, hey, I have this person or this team that does this really well. This is beyond my capacity, and you're able to transfer that ownership onto somebody else. And I know personally, making mistakes as individually or making mistakes, as a company over my career, that was one of the hardest lessons I learned early on, is owning it. But I learned really quickly that the quicker I owned a mistake, the customers were like, yeah, we know you're human. Just admit it. Just admit it when you've made a mistake. So, but I would imagine, as you are leading a company, leading people, that has to be tough. It has to be difficult to be like, okay, I'm human, and show up as a human.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. I know I've even seen that when, even for myself, just being amongst leaders who don't want to own it. And they don't like to be challenged because they're afraid of everybody finding out what they don't know. And you sit there and admittedly say, hey, yeah, I'm a leader. Yes, this is my company, but I am not the expert in this. And that's why I'm surrounding myself with the people who do. And I'm going to use that as that's what's going to make my company strong. I'm going to fill the gaps where my weaknesses are. That's what I really was hearing this whole episode is filling in the gaps where the weaknesses are that makes this company holistically strong, not me strong. And you hold yourself back, and you become sort of this, I guess what folks would call a bad leader because you're not willing to let people question you, not willing people to challenge you. And unfortunately, I feel like I've run into that so many times in my own career where you just want to ask the questions and challenge the status quo. And you've got a lot more experience than the leader around this. And they just don't either want folks to know how much they don't know. And so they try to quiet you or they try to shelf your ideas. Even if it was the better decision for the business, it sheds a light on their shortcoming. And I think what you're building as a leader and being so vulnerable and open and owning that is it's really refreshing for me to even hear you say. So what's next for you all? I mean, as this education continues, do you have anything that you're going to continue to do? Like you said, it's underutilized and most folks don't even know what it is. And you draw these crowds. Are you doing anything with education with this?
Well, one of the things is I'm planning to start a podcast myself where we're really just trying to teach the industry about what hydro excavation is, because there's so much application to it, and so many people that would really benefit from it. They have no idea what it is. They've never seen it before, and it's just not part of the standard construction culture yet, and it should be. It's growing fast, and there's not a lot of people that are out there really talking about what it is and teaching about, what is potholing and test pitting, and why do you need to do it, and why on earth would you bother pressure washing the ground and sucking it up? Like seems like that's a little extra. Like why is that a thing? But there's really great benefit to it, and there's the risk management of like a utility strike on a job site is, it can get really bad.
Yeah, and I was just going to say for our listeners and anyone with on-site power generation and all these different types of technologies, geothermal and SMR, and anytime we're breaking ground for different reasons, I think that this would be something that they would want to consider looking at, right? So I think there's a lot of, I'm just learning more and more about this, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity to incorporate this and in tandem with some of the other technologies we're trying to deploy.
Right. Yeah. About 70-80% of the work that we do is on data centers because we're in Northern Virginia, because there's so many. But a lot of the data centers, once they're active and turned up, they don't even want a shovel touching the ground because it's not worth the risk.
Wow. Well, thank you, Christy, so much for being a guest on Beyond the Megawatt. Like as all the listeners here, you can tell we don't just talk about tech. We really are challenging the status quo and how we're building infrastructure in the future. So thank you again for sharing your story, and how you got started and all of the smart ways of building a business and how we can be safer in the field. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you for stepping up as a leader, taking on something new, showing others in the industry, hey, what do you want to do next? All right, thanks everybody. Thanks Val and Christy. I guess we'll have all our listeners on for the next episode, and we have our website, right? If you want to check out what's coming next on our next episodes, feel free to check that out there.
And we will have Christy's information and bio in the links to all of our episodes. So if you want to get in contact with Christy, take a look at that. And thanks so much.